My mother died on a Thursday. By Saturday, Sarah was already circling, waiting for the exact second my guard collapsed under the weight of grief. Her cancer didn't drag on. It tore through her fast, and once the treatment stopped doing anything, she used what little clarity she had left to lock down everything: her business, her papers, her estate, and the $2 million trust she built exclusively for me. Her last instruction wasn't poetic. It was blunt. Keep Sarah away from the money. Not paranoia, pattern recognition. Sarah had a long resume of self-inflicted disasters. The emergency that cost $15,000? Half of it evaporated on a Dubai trip she pretended she needed for her mental health, and the rest disappeared when she pawned her wedding ring to pay the loan shark she'd secretly borrowed from. That was her entire personality, reckless choices packaged as victimhood. So yes, I should have been alert the moment my mother died. But grief isn't just sadness, it's cognitive slowdown. It blurs your instincts, and people like Sarah thrive in that blur. The next 48 hours were a conveyor belt of signatures, forms, and condolences I barely heard. And inside that fog, Sarah inserted herself with the kind of help that isn't help, it's reconnaissance. She hovered near documents. She lingered during every call with the lawyer. She volunteered for tasks she had absolutely no authority to touch. None of it registered at the time. You don't decode signals while drowning. Then came the funeral. The room smelled like lilies, that suffocating sweetness that clings to your clothes. I stepped away to breathe for 1 second, and that's when she struck. She grabbed my arm. Just her first sentence. "Your mother would want us to share the trust." That was her opening line at the funeral. She rolled straight into her usual monologue. Bills, bad luck, responsibilities, tragedies she rotates like pre-written chapters. And in the middle of that performance, she slipped the price tag in. $500,000. That's all. $500,000, delivered with the tone of someone asking for a glass of water. I didn't argue. I didn't explain. I just said, "No." Mom was clear. Her face didn't break. It recalculated. A tiny drop in warmth. A subtle sharpening behind the eyes. The real Sarah surfaced for a single second. "Fine. Don't help me. Just remember this moment." Low volume. High precision. A private blade. She walked off, leaving me standing beside my mother's casket trying to process how someone could pivot from grief to extortion in one breath. At first, I thought it was emotional manipulation. But no, she wasn't guilt-tripping. She wasn't hurt. She was adjusting her strategy. Sarah wasn't asking for money. She was scouting for access. And the second I said no, she switched plans. This wasn't a plea. It was her opening move. And I was too numb to recognize I'd just stepped into a war she had already started. I assumed Sarah's stunt at the funeral was rock bottom. It wasn't even the warm-up. 3 days later, I got the first alert. Unauthorized login attempt. At first, I tried to rationalize it: glitch, wrong password, some automated nonsense. But then the details loaded. Failed security questions, multiple attempts, all clustered within minutes. Someone knew enough to try. Not enough to succeed. My stomach dropped. There was only one person reckless enough to poke around a trust that didn't belong to her: Sarah. I called the bank immediately. My voice stayed calm, but that was muscle memory. Internally, everything snapped into focus. The security team pulled the logs, and the pattern was unmistakable. Repeated attempts over multiple days, same IP address, same region. Not a hacker. Not a random. Someone close. Someone sloppy. Someone who assumed I was too grief-drunk to check. And suddenly, every interaction from the funeral clicked into place. The hovering. The unnecessary offers to handle paperwork. The interest in lawyers' documents, passwords. It wasn't compassion. It was reconnaissance. While I was drowning, she was digging. She'd had access to my mom's house during those chaotic days. Filing cabinets left open, drawers half closed, papers I hadn't sorted yet. She'd gone hunting. She didn't find the key, so she tried to brute force the lock. That's when I shifted. Grief off. Instinct on. I built a tracking system, nothing dramatic, just methodical. Dates, attempted logins, timestamps, IP addresses, every deviation, every anomaly. If she wanted a war, I needed receipts. Then came the first real line crossing. The forged authorization letter. A law firm envelope arrived claiming Sarah had joint authority over the trust. My mother's signature was at the bottom, except it wasn't hers. The slant was wrong. The pressure was wrong. The spacing was inconsistent. I'd watched my mother sign documents my whole life. This was an amateur's copy. The bank almost swallowed it. And that told me everything. Sarah was counting on institutional laziness. One fake document turned into several. Amendments. Requests. Clarifications. She kept throwing paperwork like she was hoping one would slip through unnoticed. Every move exposed something. Her timing, her handwriting, her misunderstandings of legal language. Her impatience. Her entitlement. Her belief that persistence equals entitlement. I didn't react. Not to her, not to the bank, not to the family. Reacting would warn her she was being monitored. And the biggest mistake you can make with someone like Sarah is letting them know you're awake. So I collected screenshots, scans, metadata. Every text she sent a relative fishing for details. Every sudden concerned call. Every slip of her tongue. Each clue was a thread. And the more she acted, the more she exposed. By the end of the week, I wasn't overwhelmed. I was patient, because it was obvious. Sarah thought she was orchestrating a takeover while I was grieving. She didn't realize grief had ended, and analysis had begun. She believed she was driving the narrative. But I was already building the case that would destroy hers, piece by piece. The storm wasn't coming. I was manufacturing it, and she was walking straight into it. By the end of the first week after the funeral, the scale of Sarah's audacity hit me like a punch. She hadn't just tried to manipulate me, she had attempted theft, forgery, identity fraud. And every careless move she made was leaving a trail. I started with the documents. The forged amendments looked convincing at first glance. I handed them to a forensic document examiner. He flipped through the pages slowly, eyes narrowing. 5 seconds in, he muttered almost to himself. "This isn't your mother's hand. Whoever did this rushed the baseline." He pointed to the loops in the S, the uneven pressure, the sloppy flourishes. My stomach sank. Sarah had thought she could fake decades of handwriting. She couldn't. Next, the bank logs. Multiple login attempts. Each timestamp suspiciously matched times Sarah had been helping at the house. Then one small, glaring detail. The router name used during the access attempt matched hers exactly, the same one above her modem last Christmas. My stomach dropped. This wasn't coincidence. This was calculated. Every slip she made went into a folder, digital, dated, undeniable. Screenshots, timestamps, copies of documents, the exact pattern of intrusion. Each new mistake stacked like bricks, tightening the noose. I tracked it all silently, letting her arrogance do the work for me. Then came the lawyer. I handed him the amendments and explained the situation. He read in silence. His jaw tightened. His eyes flicked between pages and me. Finally, he said, "This is prosecution-level stupid." The words hung in the room. Every forged stroke screamed carelessness and ego. Sarah had overplayed her hand. Next, bait. I pretended to consider her request, sending casual, nonchalant texts. She couldn't help herself. One arrived that made my pulse spike. "I know your mom kept her passwords in the blue folder. You don't have to lie to me." Boom. Written admission. Incriminating proof. Right there. Then the phone call. She laughed lightly, almost proud, as she explained how she found documents during the funeral prep, treating it like a minor victory rather than a crime. Documents like these shouldn't just sit around. Someone responsible had to take them. Her arrogance made my blood run cold, but it also gave me leverage. Every word, every brag, every careless claim became another link in the chain. By then, her pattern was clear. Intrusion, bragging, overreach. She thought each move gave her leverage. In reality, each one tightened the noose. I was no longer grieving. I was calculating. Every text, every phone call, every whispered manipulation of family members became evidence. Sarah thought she was untouchable. She thought her charm, chaos, and manipulation were enough to win. But she didn't see the digital folder stacking evidence like bricks for her collapse. She didn't realize she was already inside a trap of her own making, and I was holding the door closed. The final realization for the audience hits hard. She didn't know the walls were closing. She didn't know each message she sent was another nail. The trap wasn't coming. It was already built. She was already inside it. The morning of the confrontation, I felt the weight of everything: grief, exhaustion, betrayal, but none of it controlled me anymore. For the first time since the funeral, the panic was gone. I wasn't responding to her chaos. I was directing it. I had invited every relative she'd manipulated. The ones she'd cornered. The ones she'd poisoned with half-truths and sob stories. Nobody knew why they were there. That ambiguity worked in my favor. Sarah walked in last, wearing confidence like cheap perfume. Chin raised. Half smirk. The expression of someone convinced the room belonged to her. She didn't notice the shift in me. Calmer than she'd ever seen, which should have been her first warning. I didn't start with speeches or explanations. I didn't give her space to twist the narrative. I laid everything on the table. Literally. Printed documents. Screenshots. Logs. The forensic report. Her texts. A timeline so detailed it looked clinical. The room stopped breathing. The forensic examiner leaned over the forged amendment first. He didn't soften a thing. Fake, he said. Not a doubt, not a pause. Rushed strokes. Inconsistent pressure. The person who did this didn't know what they were imitating. The bluntness hit harder than any accusation. Eyes around the table shifted to her. Her expression flickered. Not guilt, but calculation, trying to assess how much she could still spin. Then the bank logs. I laid them out in sequence. Attempt, failure. Attempt, failure. Same IP. Same timestamps. Same router ID that matched her exact network name. The one she proudly broadcast during Christmas visits. Her jaw tightened. Her hands twitched. That confident entrance was already evaporating. Then I played the call. Her voice filled the room, smug and careless. Documents like these shouldn't just sit around. Someone responsible had to take them. Every relative heard the arrogance, the entitlement, the confession she never thought would corner her. Silence followed, the kind that actually hurts. Her posture shifted. Rigid. Defensive. Eyes darting around the room for anyone, to rescue her. But nobody stepped in. Her audience had turned into jurors. Then came the text. A cousin held it up like a piece of evidence in court. I know your mom kept her passwords in the blue folder. You don't have to lie to me. It was the moment her face completely collapsed. No defense. That single line exposed intent. Asked one question, deliberately monotone. Do you recognize any of this? She choked on half explanations, the kind of scrambling people do when they realize the performance is over and the audience isn't buying tickets anymore. Everything she said made her look smaller, more guilty, more cornered. Then I did the final walkthrough. Not dramatic. Not emotional. Just the cold, chronological truth. Her help at the house. The forged amendments. The login attempts. The router ID. The bragging. The manipulation. The pressure at the funeral. The text. The call. Step by step, like tightening a vice. The room saw the entire structure of her scheme. Not chaotic, not accidental, but deliberate. By the time I finished, she wasn't looking at me anymore. She was staring at the table, realizing how thoroughly she'd lost. Realizing the people she'd counted on, the ones she thought were gullible enough to control, now looked at her like she was radioactive. The snap for the audience is here. This wasn't about family drama anymore. It was exposure. Pure and total. She tried to weaponize grief for $500,000. Instead, she walked straight into a wall of evidence she didn't know existed. Every lie cut its own rope. Every move she made tightened the trap. By the time she walked into that room, her fate wasn't forming. It was finished. There was nowhere left for her to hide. After the family confrontation, there was no turning back. Sarah's arrogance had evaporated, replaced with panic, and everyone had seen the truth. But exposure alone wasn't enough. The law still had to deliver the final verdict. The lawyer coordinated with authorities.
Fraud.
Forgery. Identity theft. Every crime was documented, time-stamped, undeniable. Sarah knew the walls had closed in, yet she still tried, theatrically, to claim confusion, to act misunderstood. Nobody bought it. The arrest was surgical. Police arrived quietly at her home, taking her completely by surprise. Her face shifted from disbelief to rage to sheer terror in seconds. Handcuffed, escorted past neighbors frozen in shock, she realized the chain she had built around herself was unbreakable. Every boast, every stolen document, every forged signature, it had led her straight here. Court was merciless. Her attempts to downplay the crimes collapsed instantly. The forensic document examiner testified. The bank security logs testified. And my recordings, texts, calls, confessions became concrete proof. Each piece of evidence was a nail in her coffin. Her arrogance was her undoing. The judge highlighted premeditation, repeated attempts to access the trust, falsified documents, manipulations of family members. Every calculated act exposed reckless criminal behavior. The sentence was clear: 3 years in prison, restitution for legal fees, and public acknowledgement of her crimes. Her carefully constructed world contracted into the reality she had spent years avoiding. And my mother's trust, the $2 million she had built, remained untouched, exactly as intended. But the victory wasn't just legal. It was personal. I had reclaimed control. I had turned chaos and manipulation into a weapon. Sarah's overconfidence, arrogance, and recklessness had become the instruments of her own destruction. Every move she made against me had been documented, stacked, and deployed as proof of her inevitable defeat. The family, once caught in her web, now saw her clearly.
Shock.
Relief. Anger. Recognition that what had seemed like petty manipulation was actually a calculated attempt to steal, to undermine, to betray. The full scope of her deceit had been laid bare for everyone to witness. Leaving the courthouse that day, a strange calm settled over me. My mother's legacy, her business, her trust, her hard-earned money, was secure. The chaos Sarah thrived on no longer had a home here. Final reflection. Some people believe manipulation, lies, and audacity can outsmart careful planning. Some think arrogance is strength. But for Sarah, every slip, every boast, every fraudulent move had been captured. Each became a weapon against her. She had assumed she could take what wasn't hers. Instead, she walked straight into the trap she had built herself. And the law and truth delivered the final blow.